There's a specific kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. You come home after being around people, a dinner, a gathering, something ordinary, and you sit down somewhere quiet and you just stay there for a moment, not thinking clearly, not really doing anything, just kind of deflating. And somewhere in that silence, your mind starts rewinding. That thing you said about 20 minutes into the conversation, the way your voice came out a little louder than you meant it to, the moment you laughed and immediately wondered if it sounded strange. Nobody reacted. Nobody even paused. But something in you noticed. Something in you quietly flagged it, filed it away, and apparently decided tonight was the time to review the whole archive. You stare at the ceiling, or the wall, or nothing in particular, and there's this low, familiar feeling sitting somewhere in your chest. Not quite sadness, not quite embarrassment. Something more like a dull awareness that being around people costs something, that it always costs something. Maybe you've felt this for a long time. Not dramatically, not in a way that stopped you from showing up, from laughing, from having conversations that looked completely fine from the outside. But underneath that, quietly, consistently, there's been this sense that something about you doesn't quite fit, that other people seem to exist in social spaces more easily, more naturally, like they didn't get the memo you missed. You watch someone cross a room, say something effortless, make a group laugh without visibly calculating the risk first, and there's a small, almost imperceptible ache in that. Not jealousy exactly. Something quieter. Something closer to grief, maybe. The feeling of recognizing something you don't know how to do. And you wonder, not for the first time, if something is just off about you. In that specific way, that's hard to locate and even harder to explain. It's not that you don't try. You do try. Probably too hard, actually. There are moments when you're in a conversation and part of your mind is fully present, laughing, responding, existing like a person. And another part is slightly behind, monitoring, watching how you're landing, checking if that pause was too long, wondering if you talked too much or too little, or said something that might replay poorly for someone else later. It's exhausting in a way that's difficult to describe to people who don't know what it feels like from the inside. Because from the outside, it probably looks like a normal evening. Maybe even a good one. But your shoulders are tense. They've been tense for hours, and you didn't notice until just now, sitting in the quiet, feeling the weight of your own body finally allowed to stop performing. There's a particular kind of loneliness in this. Not the loneliness of being physically alone. You know that kind too, and it's different. This is the loneliness of being around people and still feeling like you're watching from slightly outside the glass. Present, but not quite. Landed. Like there's a version of you that exists in those rooms, moves through conversations, even makes people smile. And then there's whatever this is. The part that comes home afterward and quietly doesn't know what to do with itself. Maybe this has been so long that you don't always notice it anymore. It became the background frequency of being you in the world. The low hum you stopped questioning, because questioning it never seemed to change anything. But sometimes, on nights like this, in rooms like this, the feeling gets loud enough to look at. And maybe that's worth something. There's something that happens before you even walk into a room. a kind of quiet bracing, a small internal adjustment. Like something in you shifts slightly, not consciously, not dramatically, just enough to prepare, to get ready to be perceived. Most people probably don't notice they do this, but you notice. You've noticed for a long time, actually. That moment when a social situation becomes real, when the door opens, when the conversation starts, when you're suddenly visible to other people, and something inside you tightens just a little, gets careful. And once it starts, it doesn't fully stop until you're alone again. The monitoring is almost constant, not in a panicked way. It's quieter than that. More like a background process running underneath everything else, checking, adjusting, recalibrating. You say something, and there's a half-second where you're already evaluating how it landed before the other person has even responded. You make a joke, and part of you is watching their face before you've finished saying it. You share an opinion, and immediately feel the edges of it, wondering if it was too much, too specific, too strange. You've become very good at reading rooms, at sensing shifts in energy, at noticing when someone goes slightly quiet, when a laugh feels polite rather than real, when a pause carries something unspoken. You catch things other people miss entirely. And somehow that skill, that emotional hypervigilance that you've spent years developing, doesn't make you feel safer. It makes you feel more exposed. Because now you have more data, more evidence to review later, more moments to replay at 1 a.m. when the room is dark and your body is tired, but your mind apparently isn't done yet. There's a particular behavior that might feel familiar. You're mid-conversation, present, functioning, externally fine, and something small happens. A word choice that felt slightly off. A sentence that came out differently than it sounded in your head. And you don't stop. The conversation keeps moving. But somewhere behind your eyes, a small part of you quietly marks the moment. Sets a pin in it. You'll come back to it later. Maybe in the car on the way home. Maybe in the shower. Maybe at 2 a.m., when you've already been lying still for an hour and your body is exhausted. But that specific moment from 3 hours ago suddenly surfaces with unusual clarity, and you sit with it. The exact intonation, the exact pause, the exact expression on someone's face, running it forward and backward, looking for something. You're not always sure what you're looking for. Confirmation, maybe? Evidence, some definitive proof of what you suspected in the moment. That you were too much, or not enough, or somehow wrong in a way you can't precisely name. The exhausting part isn't the anxiety exactly. It's the performance. Because somewhere along the way, you started editing yourself before you even spoke. Not lying, nothing that dramatic. Just softening certain things, shrinking certain opinions, laughing a little faster than you felt like laughing, agreeing slightly more than you actually agreed. Filling silences you didn't need to fill because silence felt like evidence of something. You became good at being palatable, at making yourself easy, at taking up the specific amount of space that wouldn't bother anyone, wouldn't demand too much, wouldn't give anyone a reason to find you difficult. And the strange thing is, it works. Mostly. People seem comfortable around you. Conversations move fine. You're not disliked. You're not avoided. But there's a cost to all that management, and it's a cost that lands entirely on you, in the quiet after, in the tired that has nothing to do with sleep. Because the version of you that showed up tonight wasn't quite you. It was the version of you that had already decided, somewhere before arrival, that the real version might not be received well. There's a specific shame in this that's hard to locate, not the loud kind of shame, the kind that comes from doing something wrong. This is quieter, more chronic. It lives in the gap between who you are when no one is watching and who you become when someone is. And for some people that gap is small, almost invisible. But for you, sometimes it feels wide enough to notice, wide enough to wonder about. You wonder sometimes if other people feel this, if they also go home and replay conversations they had 3 days ago. If they also feel a strange, low-grade embarrassment after social interactions that went completely fine. If they also feel like there's a performance, and then there's the person, and the person has been waiting quietly backstage for a long time. Maybe you've never quite said it out loud. Maybe you've barely let yourself think it clearly. But the feeling is something like, I don't know how to just be a person around other people without it costing me something. And underneath that, quieter, older, harder to look at directly, something closer to. Maybe that means something is wrong with me. That feeling deserves to be looked at, not fixed, not explained away, just looked at honestly for a moment. Because the shame of feeling socially broken is its own specific kind of pain. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for help. It just quietly shapes the way you move through rooms, the way you edit yourself, the way you come home afterward and sit in the silence wondering why being around people always leaves you feeling vaguely like you did something wrong. Even when you didn't. Even when nothing happened. Even when, by every external measure, the evening was completely fine. And here's where it gets complicated. Because none of this, not the monitoring, not the editing, not the careful management of how you present yourself, none of it means you don't want connection. That would almost be easier. If the self-consciousness came with a matching indifference to other people, at least it would be internally consistent. But it doesn't work that way. You want to be known. Maybe more than most people, actually. There's something in you that genuinely hungers for the kind of interaction where you don't have to perform. Where you can say the strange thought, and someone finds it interesting rather than exhausting. Where you can feel something visibly and not immediately worry about whether the volume was appropriate, where you can just exist with someone without the system running in the background. You want that. You've always wanted that. And the same part of you that wants it is the part that has quietly decided it probably isn't available. This is the specific cruelty of it. The closer someone gets, the more potential there is for real connection, the louder the monitoring becomes. Because real connection requires real exposure, and real exposure is precisely what the system was built to prevent. So you find yourself in this strange position, drawn toward closeness, and then, almost at the moment it becomes possible, becoming more careful, more managed, more aware of how you're coming across. Not because you don't trust the other person, not always anyway, but because some older part of you doesn't quite trust that the version of you they'd encounter if you stopped managing would actually be okay to encounter. You keep the best version forward, the version that's considered and thoughtful and appropriately proportioned. And somewhere behind it, the fuller version waits. Patient. Quiet. Slightly resigned to waiting. There are moments when you catch yourself doing this in real time. A conversation that's going well, genuinely well, warm and easy, and the kind you actually enjoy. And something happens. A beat of real vulnerability approaches. A genuine reaction surfaces that hasn't been pre-approved. And instead of letting it arrive, something in you smoothly redirects. Changes the subject slightly. Makes a small joke. Pulls back just enough to stay in the managed zone. It happens fast. Smooth enough that the other person probably doesn't notice. Maybe you barely notice yourself. But afterward, in the car, in the quiet, in that familiar space of post-social review, you notice. You remember the moment the real thing almost surfaced and didn't. And there's a strange feeling in that. Not quite regret. Not quite relief. Something more ambiguous. Something like watching yourself choose safety over presence. Again, and not being entirely sure how to feel about it. The loneliness this creates is specific. It's not the loneliness of isolation, of having no one. It's the loneliness of being with people, genuinely liking some of them, and still feeling like the connection is happening one layer above where you actually live, like you're close to people but not quite reachable, present but not quite landed. And the hardest part is that from the outside, this probably looks like connection. You laugh, you share, you ask questions and remember answers and show up when it matters. Nobody would point at your relationships and identify an obvious absence, but you feel it. That slight glass between you and the room. That persistent sense of almost comfortable, almost relaxed, almost able to just be here without the quiet calculation running underneath. Almost, but not quite. Maybe you've wondered sometimes if this is just who you are, if this is personality rather than history, if some people are simply built for easy social presence and you weren't, and that's the whole story. And maybe there's some truth in that. People are genuinely different, and sensitivity and self-awareness aren't flaws, even when they make certain things harder. But there's a difference between being a person who thinks carefully about how they affect others, which is actually a kind of emotional intelligence, and being a person who has learned to be afraid of their own unmanaged presence. One is a feature, the other is a wound that learned to look like a feature. And most people carrying the second one have spent years believing it was the first. I'm not sure which is true for you. Maybe it's both. Maybe the line between them is blurrier than any clean explanation would suggest. But the exhaustion, that specific tired that lands after social interaction, that full-body deflation, that quiet inventory of everything you said, that doesn't feel like the cost of being a thoughtful person. That feels like the cost of never quite feeling safe enough to stop watching yourself. And that's a different thing. That's worth noticing. There's a moment that happens sometimes in the middle of a conversation. You're there, fully there, physically present, saying words that make sense, responding at the right times, and suddenly there's this strange doubling. Like part of you steps slightly to the side and just watches yourself talk, watches the expression on your face, notices the pitch of your laugh, observes your own hands moving while you explain something. It lasts maybe 2 seconds, maybe less. And then you're back. The conversation continues. Nobody noticed anything. But you felt it. That brief, disorienting moment of being simultaneously inside the interaction and outside of it. Present and spectator at the same time. It's a strange thing to experience. Stranger still to try to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. Picture a Tuesday evening. Something ordinary. Dinner with people you know, or a work thing that ran long, or just an afternoon that involved more social presence than you'd anticipated. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that went wrong, particularly. Just people for a few hours. Interaction. The normal texture of being around others. You get home, you put your keys somewhere, take your shoes off, maybe get a glass of water, and somewhere in those first few minutes of being alone, before you've done anything else, you feel the room settle around you. The particular quiet of a space that isn't watching you, and your body, which you didn't realize was still held slightly, begins to release, shoulders dropping, jaw unclenching, that low-grade alertness behind your eyes going soft. It happens gradually, like pressure leaving a room, and standing there in your kitchen, in the ordinary silence of a Tuesday night, there's a feeling that's hard to name. Not happiness exactly, not sadness, something closer to relief, the specific relief of no longer being perceived. This is what it actually feels like from the inside, not the version that gets described in conversations, the polished, slightly self-deprecating version you offer when someone asks if you're an introvert. The real texture of it, which is less about needing quiet to recharge, and more about the particular exhaustion of having been visible for several hours, of having existed in someone else's field of attention, of having been, in some ongoing, low-level way, on. You didn't perform anything false. You weren't dishonest. You were genuinely present for most of it. But there was still a layer of management running, that quiet background process that's been running so long you mostly stop noticing it. And now that it's off, or at least quieter, you can feel the difference in your body. Your shoulders are lower than they were 2 hours ago. Your thoughts are slower, looser, more your own. There's a specific kind of thinking that happens in this space. Not the review, that comes later, usually. This is earlier, softer, more like a slow coming back to yourself, like a room after everyone has left, returning to its natural temperature. You might find yourself doing something small and absorbing, scrolling without much intention, or making tea, or just sitting somewhere comfortable with no particular purpose. And in that space, the version of you that exists when no one is watching gets a little room to breathe. You think things you didn't say earlier, have reactions you smoothed over in the moment, feel emotions that were present all evening but running slightly behind glass, visible to you, not quite reachable. And now, alone, they arrive more fully. Nothing dramatic, just the fuller version of what was already there. It's almost tender sometimes. This returning. Like something in you quietly exhales and says, "Okay, it's just us now." The strange part is how familiar other people's homes feel in this. You can be at someone else's place, a friend's apartment, a family member's house, and if you're there long enough, alone for even a few minutes, something in you relaxes in a way it didn't while others were present. The space hasn't changed. The people are just in the other room, but the experience of not being directly perceived shifts something. And you notice it, this small difference between occupying a space and being watched in one, and you feel something complicated about it. Because it suggests that the tiredness isn't really about people. You like people, some of them deeply. It's something more specific than that. Something closer to being seen costs something that being alone doesn't. Not because being seen is bad, but because you've never quite learned to be seen without also monitoring what's being seen. Sometimes this feeling is loneliest in its most ordinary moments, not at parties, not in large groups where social performance is expected and the rules are at least clear, but in small, quiet, supposedly easy interactions, a one-on-one conversation with someone you actually like, a casual dinner, a relaxed afternoon, where the intimacy creates enough space for the real thing to almost arrive, and instead you feel the monitoring intensify. Because small and quiet means more visible, more directly perceived, less ambient noise to hide inside. And so the moments that should feel most comfortable sometimes feel most exposed. The closer the interaction, the more careful you become. The more relaxed the other person looks, the more aware you are of what you're doing with your hands. You watch someone lean back in their chair, completely at ease, and you feel the distance between that ease and whatever you're doing, which looks similar from the outside, probably, but feels like something you're actively constructing rather than simply inhabiting. And yet, you keep showing up. You keep having the dinners and the conversations and the ordinary Tuesday evenings with people. Not because you've resolved any of this, or you haven't. Not because the monitoring stopped. It hasn't. But because the part of you that wants connection is still there, still reaching, still hoping that maybe this time it will feel different, that maybe this interaction will be the one where you forget to watch yourself long enough to actually be there. And sometimes, briefly, unexpectedly, it is. A moment when someone says something that makes you laugh, before you've evaluated whether laughing is appropriate. A beat of genuine surprise that arrives before the system can manage it. A second of being so genuinely interested in what someone is saying that the self-consciousness simply isn't there. It doesn't last long, but it's real. And maybe that's what keeps you returning to the rooms that cost you so much. That small recurring proof that the glass isn't permanent. That sometimes, for a moment, you're just a person in a room with another person, and it doesn't cost anything at all. Maybe broken isn't the right word. It's the word that surfaces sometimes. Late at night, in the quiet, after social interaction, when the review is running, and the tired has settled in, and you're lying there wondering why this is still so hard. Broken arrives because it feels like the most honest description of the gap between how easy it seems for other people and how much it costs you, between who you are alone and who you become when someone is watching. But maybe it's the wrong diagnosis for the right feeling. Because broken implies something that was whole and then fractured, something that was functioning correctly and then stopped. And that's not quite what this is. This is something that formed, gradually, quietly, in response to a world that gave you very specific information about what was safe to show and what wasn't. something that adapted, something that learned. And learning isn't breaking. It just sometimes costs you more than it should have. There's a concept that's useful here, though not in any clinical way. Just this. People who grew up feeling like their natural presence required management, too sensitive, too intense, too visible, too much in some rooms and too little in others, often develop an extraordinary sensitivity to other people's internal states. They become skilled readers. They notice things, subtle shifts in energy, small changes in tone, the difference between a laugh that's real and one that's polite. This sensitivity isn't a malfunction. It's actually a form of emotional intelligence that most people don't develop to the same degree, because most people didn't have the same early training in paying close attention to how they were landing. The problem isn't the sensitivity. The problem is that it got pointed almost entirely inward. Toward you, toward monitoring your own presence, rather than simply experiencing other people's. What was built as a way of staying safe became a mirror you can't quite put down. And here's something worth sitting with quietly. The version of you that monitors, edits, reviews, and manages, that version isn't the enemy. It isn't weakness. It isn't evidence of something fundamentally wrong with your wiring. It's a part of you that made a reasonable decision with the information it had, a long time ago, and has been faithfully executing that decision ever since. It decided you needed protecting, and it protected you. The cost was high. The cost was spontaneity and ease, and the particular freedom of being in a room without watching yourself be in a room. Those are real losses. They're worth acknowledging honestly rather than minimizing. But the system wasn't a mistake. It was a response. And there's a difference between those two things that matters. Not because it changes what you feel, but because it changes what the feeling means about you. You are not broken. You are someone who learned very thoroughly to be careful. And careful people often look, from the inside, like broken people. Because careful costs so much. Because careful means never quite arriving somewhere fully. Because careful means the door to yourself is always slightly ajar rather than open, and you can feel the draft of that, even when nobody else notices. But careful is not the same as damaged. Careful is not the same as wrong. Careful is what happens when something sensitive learns that the world requires management. And sometimes that lesson was accurate. Some rooms did require it. Some interactions genuinely weren't safe for your full presence. The system wasn't paranoid. It was responsive. It just never quite received the update that not every room is the same room it originally learned in. This is the part that's hardest to explain to yourself, actually. Not to other people. You've probably never tried to explain it to other people, at least not fully, but to yourself. In the quiet. When you're trying to understand why something that looks like social competence from the outside feels like survival from the inside. The hardest part to explain is this. You know, intellectually, that you're probably fine. That the monitoring is excessive. That most people aren't analyzing you nearly as closely as you're analyzing yourself. That the version of you that almost surfaced and then got managed would probably have been received okay. Maybe even better than okay. You know this, in the part of your mind that deals in logic. And it doesn't change the feeling at all, because the feeling isn't operating on logic. It's operating on something older and more physical than logic. Something that lives in the tightening before rooms, in the shoulder tension, in the replay loops at 1 a.m. Something that formed before you had the language to question it, and has been updating itself on evidence you weren't consciously selecting. So maybe the question isn't, how do I fix this? Maybe the question is something gentler, something like, what would it feel like to be in a room without monitoring the room? Not as a goal, not as an achievement to reach, just as a question to hold lightly, a direction rather than a destination. Because the opposite of all this careful watching isn't some fearless version of yourself that performs social ease without effort. That's not a real person. That's just a different kind of performance. The opposite of watching yourself constantly is something quieter than that. Something more ordinary. It's being slightly more interested in the other person than in how you're coming across. It's letting a reaction arrive before you've decided whether it's appropriate. It's saying something a little unpolished and sitting with the mild discomfort of that, rather than immediately smoothing it over. Small things. Incremental. Not a transformation, just a slight loosening. A degree or two of less management. Enough to feel the difference between constructing your presence and simply inhabiting it. Maybe that's enough to consider for now. Not a solution, not a path forward with steps and outcomes, just a small reframing of what this feeling means, which is less something is wrong with me, and more something in me learned to be very, very careful, and that learning made sense at the time. And it's also okay to wonder, quietly, whether the same level of care is still necessary everywhere. Whether some rooms might be safer than the system currently believes. Whether some people might actually be okay with the version of you that hasn't been pre-approved. Not all rooms, not all people. But maybe some. Maybe more than you've been willing to test. It's probably late where you are. Or if it isn't late, something about this moment feels late adjacent. That particular quality of quiet that arrives when the day has asked enough of you, and you've finally stopped moving. When the social texture of the last few hours has settled, and the review has slowed, and you're somewhere private enough to just be here for a moment without performing anything for anyone, including yourself. Nothing about what we talked about tonight is going to feel resolved. That's okay. That was never the point. The point wasn't to explain this feeling away, or to give you a framework that makes the monitoring stop, or to suggest that understanding something is the same as changing it. It isn't. You'll probably still feel that quiet tightening before rooms. You'll probably still catch yourself mid-conversation, watching yourself from slightly outside. You'll probably still come home sometimes and sit in the kitchen and feel your shoulders drop and think, why is this still so hard? Understanding doesn't rewire that. At least not tonight. But maybe something small shifted anyway. Not in a dramatic sense. Not in the way that feels like progress you could point to. More like the way a room feels different after someone opens a window. Nothing changed exactly, but the air is slightly different. Something moved through. Maybe the feeling got a name it didn't quite have before. Not a clinical name, not a diagnosis to research or a label to carry, just a more honest description of what's actually happening. Which is that you are a person who learned very early and very thoroughly to be careful with your own presence. And that carefulness has costs. Real ones. And those costs are worth acknowledging rather than minimizing, rather than assuming they mean something is fundamentally wrong with you. They don't mean that. They mean you adapted. Which is something people do. There's something quietly worth holding on to. The fact that this still matters to you, the exhaustion, the gap, the glass between you and the room, that's not evidence of damage. It's evidence of wanting something real. People who don't want genuine connection don't feel this kind of tired. They don't come home and replay conversations looking for the moment they might have been too much. They don't lie awake wondering if someone actually likes them or is simply tolerating them with reasonable grace. That particular ache belongs to people who care, who want to be known, not just accepted, who feel the difference between being in a room and actually being received in one. That's not a flaw. That's something closer to the opposite of a flaw. It's just painful when the wanting outpaces the safety, when the hunger for connection runs faster than the system's willingness to allow it. You don't have to fix anything tonight. You don't have to decide to be less careful or more open or to start testing rooms you've always managed yourself in. You don't have to do anything with this at all, actually. Understanding isn't an obligation. It doesn't come with homework. If the only thing that happened tonight is that the feeling felt slightly less like a secret, slightly less like something shameful that only you experience, then that's enough. That's actually quite a lot. Because shame needs isolation to stay loud. It needs you to believe that this specific tiredness, this specific gap, this specific cost of being perceived. It needs you to believe those are yours alone. Unique evidence of your particular brokenness. Proof that other people move through social life effortlessly while you're quietly running a system just to stay even. And they don't. Not all of them. Not even most of them. Some of them go home and sit in the kitchen too. Feel their shoulders drop. Replay the thing they said 20 minutes in. Wonder quietly if they were too much or not enough. They just haven't said it out loud either. Maybe that's the most honest thing to end on. Not that it gets easier. Not that the system gradually dismantles itself if you just understand it well enough. Not that you'll find yourself one day walking into rooms without that quiet bracing and realize you've arrived somewhere healed. Maybe just this. You are not the only person who finds being a person around other people quietly, persistently hard. You are not the only one who comes home and wonders why it costs so much. You are not the only one lying somewhere right now, in a dark room, with tired eyes, and a mind that isn't quite finished yet, trying to understand something that doesn't have clean edges. The feeling probably hasn't disappeared. It might still be sitting somewhere in your chest, that familiar low-grade awareness, that dull sense of something slightly unresolved. That's fine. That's honest. Some feelings don't need to leave to stop being unbearable. Sometimes they just need to be less alone. So, if nothing else, if the monitoring is still running, if the glass is still there, if the Tuesday kitchen still receives you like the only place you can fully exhale, at least now you know the name for some of what you're carrying, and maybe that's enough for tonight. Maybe that's enough.